Welcome to Thriveabetes and our very first video interview. Today I invite you to join me with professional rugby referee and person with diabetes, George Clancy. Hi, my name is Grania and I'm one of the founding members of Thriveabetes, which is a community group created to foster peer support for people with diabetes in Ireland. You can find out more about Thriveabetes from our website, Facebook page and Twitter feed. Our first Thriveabetes interview, and I'm thrilled to have George Clancy, a professional international rugby referee and fellow person with diabetes from Limerick, with us today. I first met George in 2015 when he came to our Clear Type 1 diabetes support group and shared his life as a professional rugby referee and somebody with type 1 diabetes. And that was just before he was heading to the 2015 Rugby World Cup, where he was one of only 2 Irishmen to make the World Cup referee panel. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, to be my first guinea pig and guest for a video interview, and for giving me something to do during coronavirus lock-in. So let's start there. How have you been handling the lock-in?
It's not been too bad, Grania. Of course, it's difficult for everybody being locked in, and in particular, not being able to go up and visit the parents and relations and people that you'd normally be interacting with. But I'm lucky enough, I live in the countryside. The weather has been reasonably kind, and I have a big garden that allows me to get out there and train. So the training has been actually really beneficial from a mental health point of view. Gives a little bit of focus to my day, and it's something that I really enjoy.
Excellent. And because you're like the rest of us, you're stay at home or work from home at the moment. So you have been getting out to exercise, but it's obviously affecting your training regime.
Yeah, of course. So normally I'd have a match outside of Ireland every weekend during the course of the season. So that's all completely ground to a halt with regard to rugby. So we're kind of left in limbo as to know what's going to happen. It's a major drain on the financial resources of the IRFU. So that's a bit of a concern from our perspective. It's interesting, actually. I went down to South Africa a couple of weeks ago to referee a game. My wife and I used it as a little bit of a holiday as well. And when we were down there, we got word that my match that I'd been sent down to referee was actually postponed or cancelled. So, everybody was on the phone, worried, should we come home immediately, change our flights, etc., etc. So, it had a real big impact really, really quickly on us. As it turned out, we stayed on the week and we came home on our scheduled flights and everything worked out really well from that perspective. But it was a kind of a very, very worrying and concerning time.
So let's go back a bit, George. And I don't know much about your diabetes story. So can we maybe tell us when you were diagnosed, how you were diagnosed, maybe what you remember of it?
Yeah, it would have been actually April 1991. And it's funny how these things kind of stick in your mind, because it was around, I'm big into not only rugby, but all sports. And the US Masters golf was on. So that's something that has kind of, that would have been on this week as well in the United States. So that's something that sticks in my mind. But yeah, so I was sent on a student exchange program over to Frankfurt in Germany, and stayed with another 14-year-old kid who was hosting me with his family. And I didn't know that I was diabetic at the time, but when I came home and my parents took one look at me, they realised that I lost about 3 stone over the course of those weeks, and I was looking very, very gaunt. So the usual symptoms of being a diabetic, drinking a lot of water, going to the toilet an awful lot, low energy, etc., etc. Rushed off to hospital with very high sugar levels, and diagnosed immediately as being a diabetic, and took it from there then. So it was a real shock to the system as a 14-year-old, as you can imagine.
I was just about to ask you what age you were. So 14, wow.
Yeah. You wouldn't, nobody really knew what was anything about diabetes in my family. We have a couple of relations that are, second, third cousins that we wouldn't really have very strong relations with, I suppose. And when they ask you, have you got a history of diabetes in the family, it's not a question you have said yes to. So it was a bit of a shock to the system for every one of us, really, my parents included, as they came to face the reality of a new situation for their son. But look, we adjusted pretty quickly, and my mother in particular was excellent as regards looking after me for those first 5 or 6 years, I suppose.
So what would your diabetes regime have been in those days? Because I was diagnosed in 1993, and I remember being on the twice daily injections and checking blood sugar levels twice a day only. Would that have been similar for you?
Yeah, it would have been the exact same. And, the old style syringes where you had to kind of dial up and mix your different types of insulin. So, as a 14-year-old, I suppose, having to get used to that and the big needles and taking your sugar levels at the regular times and eating at the right times, like those kind of medical treatments seem a little antiquated from our perspective now in 2020, and it just goes to show how fantastically things have come on in the meantime.
Yes, yeah, I definitely agree. I remember, you had to eat at a certain time, the same time every day, and the same amount every day, because the injections had to be the same time every day and the same amount every day. And it was so kind of regimented.
It was, yeah, it was. That's just, I suppose, as regards taking sugar levels and things like that would have been something that I wouldn't have been great at as a teenager. And that's where I kind of relied on the help of other people around me, like my mum, I suppose, to look after me, keep me on the straight and narrow. But as I progressed and kind of settled down a bit from my early 20s onwards, I took a lot more responsibility for my own treatments and what I should and shouldn't be doing. And, I'm lucky enough now that I have a really good handle, I feel, on my own treatment, and my control is where I want it to be.
Well, that's good. So, under like normal circumstances these days, how would you manage your diabetes? I mean, like, what's your regime kind of on an average day today now?
Yeah, so I have the insulin pump now, which I
Okay.
was fitted with maybe about 18 months ago. And like, I thought I had really good control before I was on the pump, and I was debating with myself as to, should I really go on the pump, or what real extra gains can I get from going on the pump? And I didn't really like the idea of something to be attached to me 24/7 as well. I kind of like the freedom of taking my insulin and forgetting about it for as long as I could. But I realise now the pump is just fantastic for me. So before that, we'd have to take your sugar levels recommended maybe 4 or 5 times a day, and I would religiously have done that, maybe more, up to 7 or 8 or 9 times a day, taking sugar levels. But now when we have the pump, it's giving me instant readouts. I think it's maybe 288 times a day. So access to that information is incredible. So so the big things for me would be eating the right things. So when I have my breakfast, I just have my muesli and blackberries, yogurt, that kind of thing. That gets me into the day. I know how much insulin I need to take around that. I'll check my sugar levels and make sure the calibration is done correctly with the pump and so on. And that keeps me going. So I monitor it. I check my pump every half an hour, whatever it is, whenever I need to. I'll be constantly maybe adjusting as the day goes by based on what my sugar levels are, the amount of exercise that I'm doing, and the type of food that I'm going to be eating throughout the day.
Excellent. And what was it about the insulin pump that made you decide to kind of take the leap?
Well, I was talking to people, like yourself, Grania, and people like Mike Murphy, who've been very good to me as regards their advice around these things. And I was saying, look, even if my control is at 95% of where I need it to be with the injections and needles, why not try to aim for 99 or 100%? Those extra 1 or 2% might make a difference to me, and might make a difference to my life. And it certainly has. When I look back though at the pump has removed so much stress from my life that it's incredible the difference that it has made to me. Even I worked it out like back of an envelope figure. I maintained that I'd taken 50,000 injections over the course of my life. And now I don't really have to take any more, I mean,
it's like once every 3 days.
Yeah, so yes, of course. To change the side of the pump and things like that. So, that's that something like that makes a huge difference to me.
So when you came to our support group meeting back in 2015, you were trying to maintain a full-time job with revenue as well as the professional rugby career on the weekends. And you talked a lot about like the stress of both of those things, and the traveling and the diabetes management around games and traveling. So can you just stop, because from speaking to you previously to this call, you said there's been a change there. So can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so after the way rugby has changed throughout the years is that it's gone from an amateur to a professional sport. That happened 25 years ago, but refereeing didn't really move as quickly as the players. So you'd had an element of amateur referees with professional players and so on. Many of the other unions throughout the world went to full-time professional referees, but not in Ireland. But after the 2015 World Cup, an opportunity arose for me to become a full-time rugby referee, which would have meant taking a career break from my job in revenue. And I'm very lucky in the civil service that I can take up to 5 years as a career break. So look, I decided, why not go for that? See what life is like as a professional sports person. See what dedicating myself 100% to one profession will bring me. And it was around the time that I was thinking about going on the pump as well. So I said, look, let's just take the opportunity here, give my body and mind a rest, make sure that I get that pump bedded in correctly, know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with it. And as well as that, just give myself a little bit more, less pressures in my life. So now I have a bit more time to relax a bit more. I can concentrate fully on the rugby, train when I want. So I've increased my training load to do a couple of extra sessions a week. And I feel my body is really responding to that. I've never felt fitter. And as well as that, my mind is a little bit better as well, insofar as I can indulge my passions a bit more. So I've an interest in, for example, astronomy or even mathematics and stuff like that. I don't claim to be an expert by any manner or means, but I enjoy looking at YouTube clips and trying to learn as much as I can about those subjects, which I definitely wouldn't have had the headspace to do if I was in revenue as well.
Okay. And then I remember one of the things I remember when you came to our group was talking about the grueling schedule of the weekends on the game days. And you would have to consider you were doing carb loading and like making sure your levels were at a certain point before you went on the pitch. So can you kind of take us through what that, for people who weren't in that room that evening when you came, what that was like then? And there's probably a big difference now that you're on the insulin pump. So can you maybe take us through what you used to do and maybe if the process is simplified now, take us through that too?
Yeah, it has simplified because I have more information to hand with regards to how my sugar levels are trending throughout the day. So as you know,
And I just want to add in there, sorry to interrupt you. So the insulin pump you're using is actually a sensor augmented insulin pump. So it's got the combined sensor in it.
That's right.
Because not all insulin pumps would have a sensor as part of them. So I just want to clear that up. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right. So, yeah, because I have access to all this information about what my sugar levels are doing throughout the day, I can see how much insulin I need to take. So before, when I was on the needles and injections, I'd have ran my sugar levels maybe in the mid-teens during the course of the game. That was just to allow myself a little bit of wriggle room to make sure that my sugar levels didn't go low during the course of the match. But now, because I've extra control, I know which way my sugar levels are trending. I know exactly how much insulin I should be taking before the match, and even during the game, because I wear the pump during the game as well. So I'm getting instant readouts there too when I get the opportunity to check my pump. And it's as a result of that, my sugar levels during the game have dropped a couple of units into an area that might be around the 9 or 10 mark. And I feel my performance as a result of that has increased as well. So my physical performance is better. My mental performance during the course of the game is better as well. I don't need to worry about what my sugar levels are doing. I trust the pump to do that for me. And as a referee, you have to wear a communication belt that goes around your tummy. They stick in a few machines into your back to carry around. So my insulin pump just slots in there quite easily, and it's not a big deal at all. Most of the communication guys that are sent on from the TV companies know me at this stage. They know I'll have this extra little request to slip in my belt, and there's never an issue at all. It's fantastic.
No raised eyebrows even.
No, and I suppose that would have been something, when you're in a dressing room with other people like that, you have the sensor that's on your belly, you have the connection for the pump itself, as to how people would react when they see this. But I've never really found anybody looking at me strangely or anything like that. They just get on with their own jobs. They get on with whatever it is I'm doing as well. There's no problems.
Excellent. So, and I've been following diabetes online globally over the years, especially famous people with diabetes. And I know that there's a number of professional rugby players who have type 1 diabetes, like Chris Pennell and Henry Slade.
Mm-hmm.
So have you come across any other professional referees with type 1 diabetes or diabetes in general?
I haven't, would you believe? And one or two people have reached out to me at lower levels of the game that have been that are diabetics as well. But at the professional game, no, I haven't come across that.
And I know, like, as a referee, you kind of have to distance yourself from the players on the field. But have you ever come up close to Henry Slade or any of the other players who have type 1?
Yeah, I would have refereed him in the past. But to be honest with you, I didn't realise he was diabetic on the day that I refereed him. And it's something, look, 100% the next time I get to referee Henry Slade, I will 100% be touching base with him around that. Definitely.
He doesn't get any favours, though.
No, he doesn't get any favours. But I think there's, it's nice to have that link, and anytime you do meet somebody who's a fellow diabetic, there is always that little link that you have with that person, that you know what they're going through, and particularly if you're in the same situation as yourself, I think it's nice to have, you know that you're not doing this on your own, that other people are going through the same thing and having success in how they're controlling it.
Yep, definitely. Peer support rocks. You are a huge follower of professional sports. I mean, you've been playing sports since you were knee-high to a grasshopper anyway. I've read somewhere that you were very involved in hurling before you actually dedicated yourself to rugby. So are there any role models out there in sports that you would look up to or did look up to, when you were growing up, or when you were developing your career as a teenager or a young adult? Did you notice anybody out there that would have inspired you to say, yes, I can do that even though I have diabetes?
Brian, not so much. That that might surprise you.
I don't think it surprises me because, like, back when we were diagnosed and coming into, I mean, the internet's only been around since, well, social media since 2009, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was our access to information about famous people with diabetes was extremely limited up until that point. So it doesn't surprise me. But
I mean, you'd have heard stories like Steve Redgrave.
Yes.
I think, but beyond that, Gary Mabbitt, I think he used to play soccer for Spurs back in the day. But those examples were really few and far between from my experience of it anyway. And it's not something that I would have gone out of my way to research either, even if I did have access to it. I certainly don't know anybody in the hurling world that's diabetic anyway. But hurling is certainly a big part of my life, even now following Limerick hurlers around, and I say I'm out the back there sometimes as well, with the hurling ball and lashing it against the gable end. It was all fun and games until one day I drove in the bathroom window.
Of your own house?
Of my own house, yeah. So,
okay, so you had to pay for it. At least your parents didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah, but you can imagine the natural reaction when you break the window. It's absolute panic stations, and it took me 5 seconds to realise I wasn't actually in any trouble here, that I'd broken my own window. Although my wife did have something to say about that.
That is funny. So then, going back to the refereeing, I just want to ask you, like, what's the best part of your job? Like, what's the absolute joy moment?
Yeah, well, you get a fantastic thrill being involved as a referee, no matter what the level of the game is. But particularly when there's a big crowd there, or it's a big game, and the pressure is on as a referee. There's a great rush to that. Great sense of feeling alive. Sometimes the games go well, and sometimes they don't go well. But either way, you're out there challenging yourself. That's the bit I love. I also love meeting people, and rugby has been fantastic for me because I've been able to go all over the world. Places like I've just mentioned, I was in South Africa a couple of weeks ago. I was in Russia back in September. But Japan, Fiji, Argentina, New Zealand. I could name them all off you. So rugby as a vehicle for me to seeing the world has been incredible, and I definitely owe rugby more than it owes me at this stage. It's been fantastic for me.
And then I suppose I should have started with the worst part first and then ended on an upbeat note. So the next question is, what's the worst part about being a referee?
The worst part is actually connected to the best part, and that's traveling the world, because I know that I leave a huge carbon footprint behind, and that's something that's been troubling me particularly the last number of years, as we all become more environmentally aware of the damage that we cause. We've been trying to come up with other ideas as to how we might limit the number of meetings and stuff like that we have, or the amount of travel we have to do, but it's certainly a work in progress because it is a global game, and we are called on to travel all over the place, and they want neutral referees wherever we go, and I can understand that, but that's something that's going to have to be looked at. The other side of it, of course, is referees sometimes they're oftentimes not very popular in the press, or particularly in social media. Now, I'm not in social media myself. I don't follow that, so from that perspective, it doesn't really bother me. But I know it does trouble other people. And my interactions actually with people are very good when I get to meet them face to face. I've often, believe it or not, been asked to stand in for selfies and autographs and things like that, and it's always nice to get a kick out of something like that.
That's kind of cool that you get asked for selfies.
Yeah.
So I have two more questions, and one of them is like, because I know that you had become involved with the parents group in Limerick round about the time when you were attending the World Cup, and since then. So you've probably met young people with type 1, especially young lads like yourself who are only starting to navigate this life with diabetes. So would you have any words of wisdom or, kind of advice that for them?
Yeah, look, I'm always very careful when it comes to offering advice to people because I'm not an expert in diabetes care. I only have my own personal experience of how things have worked for me, and if people can, see it as an example, fair enough. That's fine, and that's great if I can support them in any way. But people, diabetes actually, diabetics have a good amount of control over what happens to them. They have control over their diabetes. They can do the right things that are going to lead to the right outcomes. There's no doubt about that. If you follow the advice, I know it's not easy, but if you follow the advice, you will have good control. And the thing for me is diabetes, even though I have it for, as I said, since 1991 now, it's a long time. It's never prevented me from doing anything that I wanted to do, in the professional sphere or physically, and I think even now, even though I feel as fit as I said to you before, I feel as fit as I ever have done, and it's something that I want to keep doing and challenging myself at. So that's the advice I'd have to people is, keep doing the right things. You have control over it, and it will come right.
Oh, that's lovely. That's actually very, very short and to the point, and yeah, you have the control to manage this. And then I'm just wondering, because I know you're in, well, once the world starts moving again, that you're in professional refereeing, and you're happy to be there for now. But looking ahead to, because you talked about it yourself, there is going to be a point where the career in professional refereeing has to evolve into something else. So what might that something else be, or have you thought about that yet even?
I've been putting off that to a certain extent, Grania, to be honest
I'm your
with you.
sister. I do that too.
Yeah. So look, um, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a civil servant as well. I'm on a career break, so I have that luxury of knowing that whenever I get the tap in the shoulder to say, "Look, George, your time is up now as a professional referee," I can go back into the civil service quite as easily. But I know I'm just treating every day as it comes. I'm really enjoying the lifestyle that I have at the moment. I enjoyed it all the way up along, but I really enjoy this, and I want to keep it going for as long as I can. But I'm not worried about what the future holds. Either way, I'm going to cope with that. And I said I'm going to keep active no matter what level of the game the people ask me to referee games at. I continue to do that, and I know that I can get enjoyment from that. So that's all I really need to know.
Okay. So, I just thought of another question. So, I remember reading that you used to play rugby. So, what brought you into the refereeing side of it?
Yeah, I did play rugby, but I'm in my early 20s. I kind of concentrated a little bit more on hurling, would you believe?
Okay.
So I kind of drifted away from rugby a little bit, even though I was involved in my local club up in Bruff. And I wasn't playing any rugby for a year or two. But my dad, who had been a referee back in the day, he
Oh,
asked me, "Look, would you like to give refereeing a go?" Because we'd have been chatting about the laws of the game when we'd be watching matches together and so on. So maybe he might have seen something there, a chink there. So he encouraged me to give it a go. And pretty soon, I'd be the kind of fella, once I commit to something, I'd give it a good lash. And I was refereeing at a level that I'd never played at very quickly, so that gave me great encouragement to keep going. And look where it's taken me now.
wow. Wow. That's really interesting. Thank you. And then, and that's my list of questions for you, unless you want to add something else that we haven't covered.
Not at all, Ryan. I've really enjoyed it, and thanks for suggesting it, and
I
hopefully
think
it could.
it's a bigger thanks from me for putting up with the hazy internet and being my first interview guest in this very, very much experimental act. So, and thank you very, very much.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Anytime. Anytime.
Thank you so much for watching today. We really hope you enjoyed our very first interview with George Clancy. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more interviews on the Thriveabetes channel with people with diabetes.